好，下午好。我们现在再回到会场里面来继续我们下午的讲题。那下午的第5位讲者是直接我们会连线到荷兰。讲者是 Miss Yvonne Campfens。那这场讲者呢是来自荷兰全市资料中心 OA Switchboard 的执行董事。那 Yvonne 她拥有阿姆斯特丹大学计量经济学的硕士。那在学术出版跟相关的服务领域工作了30年。他待过的公司，如果您年岁够多的话，你一定听得懂 Elsevier、Sweats Subscription Service。然后这个我不太会念哦 ，Bomb、Saru、Van Loner、Springer Media，OK，然后 Springer Nature。那他参与的这个工作流程的解决方案，譬如 ASA、ALPSP， 然后 Transfer Code of Practice。2018年，他开始了自己的专业顾问公司。那2019年开始参加 OA Switchboard。2020被任命为这个Stinch 基金会 OA Switchboard 的执行董事。那今天演讲的题目呢，是由全球生态系统的强力合作以推动 Open Access 策略。The OA Switchboard, a safe space for publication metadata. Okay, our next speaker today is Miss Yvonne Campfens from OA Switchboard, Amsterdam, Netherlands. She will share with us building robust connection in the global research ecosystem to drive open access strategy. 那我们现在先请 Yvonne 测试一下她的这个档案，然后能够把它放上来。Yvonne, the floor is yours. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction and for the opportunity to meet with you today. Can you hear me well and can you see my slide?
Yes.
Yeah,
the
everything's
slide is
fine.
great. Yeah, so everything's great.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Yes, I think you in your introduction mentioned all the places where I've been over the last 30 years, and it's wonderful to be here today to speak about open access. Towards the end of my presentation, I will talk more about the OA Switchboard. But first, about open access and the global research ecosystem and how we got here, the global transition to open access. And then quite practically, all the different vendors and solutions and all the challenges that you're faced with and the publishers are faced with and the funders are faced with and the solutions out there to help. And then I'll talk about the switchboard. Research. It's maybe good to mention and to bear in mind what this was all about. Research, the creative and systematic work undertaken to increase the stock of knowledge. That is what it was and is all about. And then documentation, discovery and interpretation is needed. And academic researchers, those are the ones who carry out original high-level research that generate knowledge and progress that progresses current understanding. Now, this is, you probably know, but where it all started, 1667, I believe, this is what we like to believe, the first scientific journal by the Royal Society, and they already talk about how this is to support sharing information and contributing to progress and improving knowledge and for the universal good of mankind. That is what already in the 17th century was thought to be the purpose of scientific journals and scientific publishing. Now, this research ecosystem that I'd like to talk about is really about building connections. We cannot progress human knowledge and research cannot progress if there is no links between these 5 entities. It's the researchers at the center, as I already mentioned, and they often work in institutions, universities, or research centers. These are examples of organizations. Obviously, the research funders who provide the money, the grants to do the research are also organizations, and the publishers are important players in this ecosystem. But it's the individuals, the researchers who get grants, do their research projects, collaborate with others, and the output, the research output, is what is being shared and is being discussed amongst them. And this is what helps to progress science. I already mentioned in terms of organizations, and this is relevant for the OA Switchboard. That's why I mentioned them here. But of course, there's many more players and institutions out there. But the triangle of the research funders, the research institutions, libraries and consortia, and the academic publishers is the triangle of organizations that is relevant in this ecosystem, and also for the Switchboard. Now, what this is all about is building blocks and infrastructure, because without building blocks, and the building blocks are the persistent identifiers, and without infrastructure and standards providers, this cannot function. And what I'd like to talk about here in this introduction is that there is a foundational layer of community-driven, not-for-profit initiatives that provide core stability through open infrastructure. Over time, the community has organized itself to develop a foundational layer consisting of these building blocks and organizations fulfilling a core function. And these open community-led initiatives and standards have been created in order to provide essential core services to everybody, to all entities in the global scholarly research system, whether commercial or non-commercial. Persistent identifiers such as DOI, ORCID, and ROARs, as well as initiatives like Counter, Crossref, DOAJ, and the OA Switchboard, share a common purpose of enabling robust connections between research grants, projects, outputs, organizations, and individuals. Open APIs and interoperability are key to this end. And all these open infrastructure initiatives collaborate rather than compete with one another, because they serve as a collective basis for innovation by both commercial and non-commercial entities. Now, this opens the door for services fulfilling a specific need to be built on top. And there, as opposed to a foundational layer, competition and commercial solutions are likely to drive innovation and bring down cost. Now, the last bit in this rather busy visual is on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. And this is meant to show a continuum, because besides the not-for-profit community initiatives on the PID side, as well as on the foundational infrastructure and standards provider side, there's also commercial players who play a good role and have a job to do. But what you see on the left-hand side is that it's the FAIR principles that provide the continuum, and the foundational layer of the community initiatives is more compliant with the FAIR principles, meaning findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Other identifiers are out there but might be sold under a license, and that is fine. As we mentioned, the layer on top drives innovation and brings down cost, and competition is good there. But the good news is that there is this layer of foundational infrastructure and standard providers as well. There on the right-hand side, you also see a continuum. In the text on the right-hand side, there are the POSI principles, again put together by the community, the principles of open scholarly infrastructure, and you will see that the foundational layer is more compliant with these POSI principles than commercial solutions. And again, that's fine. We coexist all in this overall ecosystem, and we have a role to play. Okay, moving to part 2. How did we get here, the global transition to open access? And this is actually a video. I'm not going to show the video. I thought that was a bit too tricky in the online conference, but you see the URL below. It's a very entertaining video, which explains already in the first 20 seconds very well what open access is all about. Now, I'm going to focus on open access of research articles, but of course, and I have some slides on that as well, there's also open access for books. But the common denominators are these elements that are mentioned here. The access is free. There is no charge, there is no paywall to get access to the content. What is also a critical element is that it's immediate. And I'll get to that. There's all kind of flavors of what people call open access, but the common understanding is that it has to be immediate. So no embargoes. The free access, the open access is immediate. As I mentioned, I'll talk mostly about research articles. It's online in a print environment. This is not relevant. It's about availability, that you can also get to it. It's not only that it's made open, but if it's hidden somewhere on the server and you can't get to it, it's not really open access. So it has to be available. You need to be able to get to it. And a critical component is the CC, this Creative Commons license, which determine the reuse rights. And that is all about what are you allowed to do with this content that is made open, free, immediate, online, and is available to you as a user, or maybe even as a commercial company. What are you allowed to do? And that is governed by the license under which it's made available. Now, I've made some screenshots because it's really, as I said, an entertaining, illustrative video. So it's all about making all scientific research content available for anyone, anywhere in the world. To read and to access, and again, to build upon, that is what research is all about, the collaboration and progressing the knowledge. So it's to read, to access, and to build upon. So other people can do interesting things in new ways with the materials. And the idea is to make the research literature more valuable. These are the people who put this video together, and the link is on the slide. Now, I already mentioned many different definitions, different terminology, but the most common to refer to open access, and as I mentioned, this was a slide about books, but actually it's also used for journal articles, are two major models for open access. The things you hear most about is gold and green, and they're quite different, so it's good to have a look what this is all about. Gold open access, let me first start with a big misconception. A lot of people think that gold open access has to do with APC, so article processing charges. That is not necessarily the case. That is not a precondition. The point of gold open access is that it is immediate and it's an edited version. It's created by the publisher. So it is the publisher who drives the content to be open access, sometimes referred to as the version of record. And it's published under a license that permits reuse, a Creative Commons license. And sometimes, not always, a fee is charged. So the key component here is it's the publisher who makes on their server, on their platform, the content open access. That's gold, and it's the version of record. Now, green is self-archiving, sometimes referred to. It's actually the author doing it. So it's often the author accepted manuscript. It's archived online in a repository, and it does not include any work done by the publisher, such as copy editing and proofreading and so on. It may also not be listed on the publisher's website, so that is often more difficult to find if it's on an institutional repository, but it can still be freely accessed, and there should be no barriers to reuse. So green open access is also referred to as self-archiving. So it's the author taking the initiative here. Now, these are the two most common terms being used, but there is many more. You probably heard about diamond, bronze, black, hybrid, gratis, Libre. Again, this is a site done by a group working on open access books, but the terminology is similar, or is comparable. not everybody, including myself, agreed that these are all open access. I personally, for instance, have a problem with bronze open access. Bronze is not under a Creative Commons license. It's at the discretion of the publisher. They can close the content anytime they like. It's fantastic. When I worked at Elsevier 1993, 1994, 1995, we already had this concept, and at that time it was called free promotional access, and that's fantastic, but I personally don't think it meets all the criteria of open access. I still list it here because you hear it a lot, and probably what I want to share with you is that you be careful that you have the same understanding as other people. If these terms are being used, what is advisable to look at is this license under which is published. Which version is it? Is it the publisher's version or the author's version? Is it accessible? Is it findable? And is it immediate? And then I think you can have an understanding of what you're looking at, and whether you call it green, gold, black, diamond, bronze, I think is sometimes only confusing. Then we get, and this is in all honesty taken from Wikipedia, but I thought that was a really, really good summary and good overview of these licenses under which open access content is being published. I already mentioned Creative Commons is the common term for these licenses, but there are a lot of flavors, I think at least 6, and kind of combinations. These are the 4 main components, but sometimes they are combined. The key point is that the author, when it's open access, truly open access, when the reuse is governed by a Creative Commons license, the author retains the copyright. And what it then is about is what others can do with that work and what the author allows them to do. And that is again a continuum, and it covers elements like the right to share, to use, to break it apart, and maybe even use it in commercial products. So you often hear about CC BY. Attribution is actually the simplest form. You always, when it's open access, when somebody's reusing that material, it has to be attributed to the original author and the original work. And then there's CCSA, CCNC, CCND, and as I said, sometimes even combinations. I'm not an expert here, but I wanted to flag that there's pretty clear definitions, and it's a continuum, and it determines the extent to which the content can be reused. That is what it's all about. Now, there's 100,000 variations also of the publication cycle. People often draw that. I'm sharing this from another site from the University of Winnipeg in Canada. I think it's a nice version. It clearly shows the traditional journal publishing cycle, where it is about creation, evaluation, and then publication in a journal. Then the publisher helps with dissemination and access, preservation, and it can be reused. So this is a traditional journal publication process. Today, giving you a bit of an overview of how we got here and what's happening, I thought I have to mention the march of the preprint, because this is a different order of events. It's still scholarly communications, but a preprint is really something different. I'll show you in a minute the difference between traditional journal publishing and the route of preprints. But what we've seen, especially during COVID, is an incredible increase in use of preprints, and I'll get also to the latest announcement from eLife, who are radically changing their whole approach to publishing. In the top workflow, you see the traditional process. So a researcher has done their research, is writing it up, is selecting a journal to publish in. Then the journal will take care of the peer review, and then the publisher publishes the article, whether open access or not, but that linear publication process with the author submitting, choosing a journal, editorial peer review process, and then publication is the traditional journal process. Now, what is the big difference with a preprint is that actually the debate amongst researchers is opened up immediately, and it's in the open, so it's not organized by the publisher. There is a preprint server, and actually the researcher posts it there immediately. Then there is discussion, there is feedback, there is versions, there is improvements, and then the version of record is published. And that is a very fundamental different order of event, and I'd like to flag that this is very, very much happening, growing, and of course also challenging the role of the mostly commercial publishers. Now, a timeline. I already mentioned the Royal Society in the 17th century, but it was, of course, the ancient Greeks and maybe even before the 4th century before Christ, Plato and his library in ancient Greece, and then long time nothing, and the Transactions Journal, as I mentioned, what we like to believe is the first scientific journal in the world in the 17th century. Then a big event, World War II, at least in Western Europe, for also the dissemination of information has really taken off right after. And then a huge development in the 90s, 80s, 90s, the famous cereals crisis. And if you've been around long in the library world and in this ecosystem, you know this graph, and I have it on the next slide, but we all know it. The prices of scientific journals, of cereals, were increasing way faster than anything else in the market, and this was a problem. Worthwhile to mention, in 1991, the very first preprint server. People tend to forget that, and I also was talking about the march of the preprints, but already in 1991, Ginsparg started his archive preprint server in physics, and that's been around now 30 years. It's been there. I mentioned OASPA because they only were founded in 2008, Open Access Publishers Association, and here we are today at the event. This is just a graph. There's many graphs. It just illustrates that the consumer price index was growing a much lower rate than the cereals expenditure as of the mid 80s, and this was leading to major developments also around big deals, but also open access. But before we present a more detailed timeline, I'd like to talk about discussion and people challenging what was really happening in global research. And I started by talking about research being there to advance human knowledge and advance the world. Around 2017, a very important paper was published by Eileen Fife and others called Untangling Academic Publishing, and they were presenting an analysis and expressing their concern about a growing divergence between the different roles of academic publishing. And what did they mean with that? The growing divergence was referring to three things. First of all, the function of journals in disseminating validated knowledge, disseminating the peer-reviewed research outputs, and the role of distributing and allowing people to discuss and progress science is, of course, undoubtedly one and the primary function of journals. But what it has developed into is also what they call symbolic capital for career progression. This has to do with impact factors. Prestige economy is often used. So what has happened after the 60s, often attributed to Robert Maxwell from Pergamon, is that they really perfected the model of impact factors, used that to manage journals, because it has turned into, and that is number two, symbolic capital for career progression. If you publish in journals with a high impact factor as a researcher, you can advance your career, you get more grants, and that has been mixed up with the original purpose of disseminating validated knowledge. And the third component being challenged here is profitable business. It's the commercial players, but also sometimes societies making a lot of money. Often people claim it's more than in the pharma industry that the publishing industry is making profit. So these three things are kind of conflicting and being mixed up, and yeah, I would say quite an important paper to assess here. I should say it doesn't end here. Later, there was another important issue raised, which was the transfer of inequity of access to inequity of authoring. So whereas open access may have seemed to provide a great answer to this challenge and this unwanted development, new voices stood up, and this is a big theme in open access, that not everybody can afford to pay the APCs. So even though the philosophy of open access is embraced, and you can hardly disagree with the idea that research should be available to everybody to debate and to progress, the barrier of an APC is bringing new inequity in the world. And Toby Green and Richard Pointer had already written about that in 2018. This is a very busy slide. The slides will be shared with you afterwards, but it is incredible if you look at that timeline, what has happened in the last 30 years. And I'm going to quickly check how I'm doing on the time. I think it's fine. I'm doing fine. I already mentioned, well, the Berlin Declaration. I think that is by many seen as the starting point. Actually, in 2002, there was the Budapest Initiative, and in 2003, the Bethesda Statement and the Berlin Declaration. But actually, things happened already before. Again, I mentioned archive. Also, the big deal, the first introduced by Academic Press in the 90s, was definitely a stepping stone towards this whole development. And often forgotten, but in Brazil, in Latin America, in South America, already in 1997, a huge and still existing open access initiative without APCs, a cooperative model, was established by CLO in 1997. I don't think I will mention everything, but what is important is the research funders developing policies. So the Wellcome Trust, I believe, was the first in 2005. Very important initiative, Scope 3, founded by CERN and others. DORA as an alternative to impact factors. So quite important in 2013, the DORA initiative signaled the limitations and the dangers of journal-based metrics as a means of assessing individual articles. I like that comparison with a hotel. It can have a great rating. It can be a 4-star hotel, but that doesn't mean anything for your individual experience in a specific room and the service you experienced at a room level with your during your holiday. That's kind of the comparison. Very difficult and dangerous to compare a journal level metric and have that imply something about an individual researcher. Springer Nature in the Netherlands, Springer at the time was one of the first with a large deal with OA components in 2015. Another research funder initiative in 2017, the Gates Foundation started their open research platform. Coalition S, Plan S, a collaboration between funders starting in Europe but expanding to other parts of the world as well. I'll get to that, but basically the fundamental thinking there is that any research that is funded with public money should be made available free of charge, and yeah, putting some poles in the ground as how that should be done, but as a dot on the horizon. This is what the research funders wanted. If we fund your research with public money, you researcher, we require that you publish it open access. Yeah, then a lot of developments around different publishers. I think what is interesting, MDPI in 2020 becomes the largest OA publisher, a born digital, a pure OA publisher without any legacy, who started OA publishing, becomes the 5th largest publisher in the world and the largest OA publisher. Then PLOS in 2020 launched a very interesting concept to deal with this issue of inequity, a model not based on APCs, not based on individual authors having to pay a publication charge to publish OA, but a community action publishing model. And yeah, following Plan S in 2018, started in Europe in 2022, this year, a super important memo was published, OSTP, in the United States, very similar in the philosophy, issuing guidance to make federally funded research freely available without delay. Yeah, and eLife, I already mentioned earlier this year in the autumn, they announced to really end the accept-reject decisions following peer review and really move to further innovate the model of preprints. Right. This is from Plan S when it started, very much the statement, science can only function properly if research results are made openly available. This is a preamble from Mark Shields, president of Science Europe, in 2018. And what we see is that open access is growing rapidly. On the right-hand side, you see a graph. This is coming from an annual survey from OASPA amongst their members, how in hybrid journals and also pure OA journals, the output is growing rapidly. So what we see, open access output growing rapidly. Increasingly, funders and institutions are paying for OA centrally, so not individual authors having to pick up these APCs. But what we also see, business models are becoming more and more diverse. Funders and institutions are expanding requirements, and we, of course, and that is fantastic in science, we have lots of international collaborations with multiple authors, multiple institutional affiliations and funder arrangements, and how that all can be complied with, or how to deal with that sometimes being conflicting, what one author in one country has to comply with versus another one, is really a big challenge into operationalizing and delivering on these requirements. Again, just some graphs. I want to refer, just in the interest of time, to the OASPA site. They publish this every year, the results of the survey of how and under which licenses and where and how open access is growing. Now part 3, and I think I'm doing good on time. Different workflow solutions, and then I'll get into more detail in the OA Switchboard. Back to the slide I started with, just to remind us again, so now we are going to talk about some of these community initiatives, of which the Switchboard is one, but also the commercial services and non-commercial initiatives, the innovative services and solutions that are available to deal with all these implementation and workflow challenges in this world today. So here I am distinguishing a bit workflow support solutions for publishers, because they also have their challenges, and solutions available on the market for institutions and consortia. So a player that's been around for a long time and has really shaped their services for publishers is Copyright Clearance Center. Very traditional name, implies copyright. That is where they also provide a lot of services, but in 2018, they launched a new service, an open access agreement manager, to automate and streamline funding of APCs. Now, there are about 30 plus publishers at the moment, ranging from Cambridge University Press to Portland Press to AAAS to ACS, to the Microbiology Society, to the Royal Society. A lot of publishers outsource this work to CCC. And basically what this does is, throughout the publication journey, so this traditional journal publishing process where an author submits their manuscript to one of these publishers, throughout that editorial process, there is workflow support provided by this Copyright Clearance Center solution for the publishers to sort out who is the author, what are their affiliations, who are we dealing with, is there an agreement in place? If the author is from the University of Amsterdam, the system will check if there is an agreement, what the parameters are, and whether or not the author is entitled to open access, whether they need to pay or whether that is taken care of centrally. And if there is no agreement in place, then CCC takes care of the billing, so the invoicing and the collection of money of the APCs outside of agreements. And they've done that for many years, obviously with rights and permissions. They already have a billing module to work with authors. The big point also of Plan S and also of the Switchboard is that people would like to relieve the author, the individual researcher, from being involved in these kind of financial transactions and having to worry about purchase order numbers and the likes. Now there's the second player, Cyprus, and there's probably more. So let me say this is not a complete overview, but I believe these are the biggest players at the moment. Aptara, Cyprus, also provides a service for automating the collection of publication charges, supporting OA business models, and they also come from a different background, well, from a background in supporting publishers with technology solutions, and they take a slightly different approach, but the concept is similar. They help publishers to manage their agreements and to deal with the author communication. Large publishers who make use of Aptara Cyprus are Sage and Oxford University Press, and also smaller are joining. So again, here competition, I already mentioned it. I think that's good, driving innovation and hopefully driving prices down. But this is the publisher's point of view. And again, I should stress there's probably more players out there. Also, a lot of publishers work with IT companies who develop in-house and boutique solutions, but these are Cyprus and CCC are kind of off the shelf. I'm sure it's customized, but they really are well-known players to provide support to publishers. Now it's kind of getting busy on the institutional side, a lot of new players stepping up because there's a need, I think. It's very clear that there is a need for workflow support on the institutional and consortia side. Consortia Manager has been around already since 2014. They provide a workflow tool and ERM for consortia. I don't know if you are using it. I can't give the number because I don't want to underestimate it, but they have a lot of consortia around the world who are being supported by this tool built to specifically help consortia, to help them with their daily management task and their decision support. A newer player, but also around already since 2016, is Kronos Hub. This is just simply taken from all these players' websites. They streamline the open access management from different angles. I happen to know they, because we also work with them, the National Consortium in Luxembourg is working with Kronos Hub, and also actually the National Funder, FNR, is working with Kronos Hub. And then a newer player is Oable, recently been taken over by Wiley. They also provide institutional open access management solution, as they put it themselves, a single solution to seamlessly approve, pay, and manage OA agreements and publications. So here you already start to see what's happening. A lot of workflow solutions, a lot of systems on the institutional side, but also a lot of systems and tools on the publisher side. And how do you deal with all of that? And this is exactly where the Switchboard comes in. But before we go there, I want to show something else, other players and another angle, because so far I've talked about workflow support, but there is also another element out there where there are systems and solutions and tools available and very, very relevant. Maybe I should say here also that very often people talk indeed about workflows and dashboards, but another component, I think nothing to do with a workflow support, is data analytics and visualization. In order to analyze deals or to connect to your research, to know what's going on, where are your researchers publishing, and maybe not only as the corresponding author, I already mentioned it, these multitude of international authors collaborating and publishing, one under a national funder policy, another under a consortium agreement, is getting very confusing. And if you want to really put a handle on what's happening here, what I know a lot of consortia and larger institutions do is analyze the data. And they do that sometimes with data scientists who take after cleaning it up, and again here the switchboard comes into play again, after cleaning it up, do their own analysis using R or Python and program their own scripts to do that. I see that happen a lot with the larger consortia. Then what I see is that larger institutions often have off-the-shelf analytics and visualization tools like Power BI or Tableau. If we have time, I will show you from Columbia University in the US how they are actually loading JSON data into Tableau to analyze it and to help them with support for their policies. And then you also have industry-specific players. So EBSCO Panorama provides a tool where they are able to take different data sources from different systems to help provide insights for library analytics. And also here CCC has recently launched something which is called OA Agreement Intelligence. So I want to position this differently from the workflow support. This is really taking the version of record, taking metadata from articles published and finding out, visualizing, reporting, analytics, knowing what's going on. And this, why you want that, publishers sending you standardized metadata, and if that happens via the switchboard, you will see in a minute that it's standardized and you get it in the same format from all the different publishers. It doesn't need to be cleaned up. It can be uploaded immediately into these systems, and then what you can do is monitor your publishing activity on a regular basis. As I mentioned, where are your researchers publishing, justifying research strategies and directions, and maybe further internal and external reporting. It can help you to decide where you want to negotiate and oversee your agreements that you've already signed, monitor the uptake. If you have a deal where every researcher can publish for free, open access, and in the reports you find that actually the article was not CC BY, maybe the author slipped or maybe the publisher made a mistake, you can monitor what's happening there. And you can further explore, and this is what Columbia in New York is doing, use these kind of data and analytics to further explore OA strategies and who should be funding it and how much budget should we make available. Now, this is where the switchboard fits in. In the last 5 minutes, I'll talk about how the switchboard as a not-for-profit, mission-driven, community-led initiative was designed to simplify the sharing of metadata information between publishers, funders, and institutions about open access throughout the whole publication journey. So these 3 stakeholder groups were at the table when the idea was born in 2018, and in the interest of time, I just refer you to the landing pages, which explains specifically from their point of view, from the 3 stakeholders' point of view, what the switchboard can do. But first and foremost, it is an intermediary bringing efficiency and standardization in this communication. So therefore, it's serving all 3 masters. Very important, we spend a lot of time defining the principles, not-for-profit, also open source, being able to connect, being inclusive. And what it is, it's both a mission-driven community, so we share a lot of best practices, we exchange a lot of information between the stakeholder groups on how to progress and what we can learn about metadata and standardization. But technically, it's also a practical tool, and at the moment we support 2 use cases. Technically, it's a central metadata exchange hub. It provides a standardized messaging protocol and shared infrastructure, and it is built by and for the people who use it. And we use existing persistent identifiers. We try not to reinvent the wheel. And the power is this intermediary concept, simplifying the many-to-many relationship. Imagine one API integration instead of 2000 for a publisher. And of course, it's early days. We at the moment only have 20 publishers who report through the Switchboard. We reach about 2,500 institutions, but at least for those, there is improved efficiency, and we are working hard with everybody to reach more adoption, because then the service gets better, there's more connections that can be made, and it will also be cheaper because we do this open source and we're not for profit. We are committed to lower the prices if we reach more people. Very important, it's complementary and supportive to the vendor systems offered to the institutions and publishers. Actually, that was one of the reasons why the Switchboard was developed, because all these systems need to talk to each other. I'd like to compare it with SWIFT in banking. That was developed 40 years ago, underwater, allows systems to talk to each other, and that is what the Switchboard is about. It is designed to operate and integrate with all stakeholder systems. I'll go quickly here because I was asked to present some evidence, and I think I can still do that. So why join as an institution? What you will get is consistent data format from multiple publishers, reduce manual efforts and increased efficiency. If you want to do these analysis, you can load it straight through API, through a webhook into your systems, whatever you're using. And since it's a community initiative and strives for standardization to bring down transactional cost, we hope you see it's the right thing to do to join and support the initiative. Now, some evidence, some cases. This is all on our website. Quotes from real users. Curtis Brundy from Iowa State says, OA Switchboard makes OA publishing highly visible in a way that it wasn't in the past. Even if you can't see an immediate application because you think you don't have enough open access deals at the moment, you may be surprised at the amount of OA publishing your individual researchers are producing, for which not under a deal, maybe they pay an APC, or maybe they are co-author to a publication that might be charged to a deal in the UK. Also from Iowa State, they are very aware of the inequity and the challenges around APC open access. So they also use the Switchboard reporting, the publishers who publish models like Subscribe to Open and Diamond, and they use that to shed light on where they should invest and put their money. Then in the UK, the institutional repository use case I want to mention, University of Kent, they use the metadata pushed through the Switchboard by the publishers to alert them to articles that they hadn't found out about before, usually because it's not the corresponding author from their university. And what they then do is either create records in their institutional repository or complete existing records. This one I'll skip for now. Then Columbia. What are they doing with the data? So Catherine Brooks talked about that in our last webinar, and she is using the data from the Switchboard to analyze how their authors are publishing, and this helps them to report to the senior management in the university, so beyond the library, to understand and to support the conversation on how Columbia University should support open access on a university level, which budget that should come from, how they should be doing that. I'll go quickly, but there is the recording here. We invited them to present at our latest webinar, which was the 27th of October, and the recording is available to you. I'll quickly go through, but basically what they do, this is a bit technical, but what they do is they take this JSON data coming out of the Switchboard, 20 publishers and soon 22 publishers, I think we reached that before year end, they are all reporting to Columbia, to the participating institutions, about the version of record metadata. This comes in a standardized JSON format across all these 22 publishers in the same format. And what Columbia does is load it into Tableau, and they can easily see here where their researchers are publishing, and they showed many more graphs also around specific journals, around licenses, whether indeed their author was the first one or not the first one, and it gives them a feel for what is happening here. And the beauty is they automatically feed these JSON data into this specific analytics tool. So let it be clear, this is outside the switchboard. We are just a mailman, a message hub. We provide the data across different publishers in the same format, and then the universities take it from there. I think this is the last quote. Ivy Anderson now really retired, but she served for another year after her retirement on the board of the Switchboard, and we are very proud that she did. She's been a pioneer, and what she said early on about the Switchboard is that they were delighted in California to pilot not only their own shared funding model, they have a very specific idea about how to split the cost for open access publishing between research grants and money from the library, and they experimented with another publisher. So this is all about collaboration. The Royal Society also a supporter and being at the table from day one. And so this shows their collaboration, but also she illustrates here the importance of shared infrastructure that the Switchboard is supporting the Royal Society and CDL to experiment in their pilot with their new model and to drive open access. So this wonderful quote by a wonderful lady, I think, shows all the elements of the collaboration between the stakeholders, the shared infrastructure that the Switchboard provides. And with that, I think we have 10 minutes left for Q&A.
Yeah. And yes, very great. I mean, from your talk, we have very, very clear picture about how the solution goes, and it's between the publisher, institution, and consortia. Yes, it's great help. I mean, I don't know if there is a question. Let me talk in Chinese, okay?
Sure.
OK，我想这是一个非常清楚又这个清楚的流程啊。我们可以看到说，就是当我们面临这么多抉择的时候，到底在我们自己的机构里面有多少的东西是很清楚的，然后是可以在出版社跟机构跟图书馆联盟之间才取得一个平衡。那怎么样是一个比较均衡的机制 ？OK。I see that there is a question here. Can you see that? In the dialog box. Okay. Okay, let me bring up. Okay.
So sorry, I can't find the dialog box. Can you?
Okay.
I see the chat.
Okay, no problem. We will copy the text and we will bring it up to the desktop.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. It's
Okay.
talk about, yeah.
First one, would like to know why some institutes hesitate. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for the question. Why people hesitate to join. It's probably because I haven't had the time to get to them. It's a very, we started in 2018, 2019, 2020, but we've only been operational since January 1st, 2021. And we don't have a lot of money, right? I mentioned we're not for profit. That also means we don't have investors. We are short on working capital, so we're going slowly. The only reason is probably that I haven't gotten to them. I had a lot of consortia trialing this year, and then it gets to decision making. Obviously, a lot of these consortia are on a January to December budget process, so a lot of decisions are being taken now. I can tell you that the whole of Sweden have recently signed a national deal with the Switchboard, and earlier this week, I'm allowed to tell you, but it's not yet officially announced, the whole of Germany. So Germany has signed this week, so all the German institutions join. And why not earlier? Yeah, they have been testing for the last 5 months, and the budget decision only took place November, December time. And yeah, that is why I'm so happy to speak with you. I have to do a lot of these things myself. I don't feel sorry for me. I really enjoy, but we simply don't have more money. We really don't have more money to put more resources in talking to you. So that's why I'm so excited to speak with you now. And I can offer you also a free trial. What we normally do is we indeed do a trial for a couple of months. Then you can really look at the data. Then it starts to come to life. Then you see what it is, what it means for you, and you can judge if it's valuable. Actually, that is probably another reason, is that people were waiting for more publishers to join. This was a classical prisoner's dilemma, classical chicken and egg. You know, people said, this is a great concept. I like the idea, but you know what? I don't see enough publishers. If you have more publishers, then we join. But the publishers were saying the same thing. They said, oh yeah, good idea, but you don't have enough consortia. You don't have so this has been a classical prisoner's dilemma. And so, sorry, I took long for the first question. The other is, in the last section, you mentioned cases supportive. Yeah, good question. Germany also has an open APC initiative to report. How does the Switchboard? Very, very, very good question. How does the Switchboard differ from something like Open APC? And I can also tell you the same happens in France. Very often on a national level, of course, either consortia or funders want to get insight, indeed, in all the cost. The difference is that the Switchboard can help to provide the data. We are not building a database. We're not doing the analysis. And what the initiatives often have to do is collect data from multiple sources. But what the Switchboard will contribute, and I haven't used the word yet, and it's one that I use often, it's authoritative data from the source. And what that means is that the metadata that the publishers are sharing through the Switchboard, especially the publication metadata, so article type and all this information about the authors and the listing order, is this author number 1 or author number 17? What are their affiliations? That kind of publication metadata is sourced from the so-called JETS XML. So the JETS XML is the technical format that is underneath the PDF and underneath what you see on the website. So really, really, truly the version of record data. And that is different from what is coming from other databases and sources. So the key thing that Switchboard contributes, again, complementary to OpenAPC, is that it provides a subset of the data from the source, directly from the publishers, and it's only doing the data delivery. The building of a database and the analyzing and everything is happening in the OpenAPC initiative. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Let me speak in Chinese briefly.
Sure.
Okay. 刚刚第一个问题问到说，看起来好像因为 OA Switchboard 非常的新，那好像参加的人不多，那这个问题怎么办？当然，事实上他刚刚举的例子里面，包含几个比较aggressive 的学校都采用这样机制。其实 OA Switchboard 它的一个用途，它是在于就是说出版社端提供了非常多的 metadata。然后它经过这样子后面 Jackson XML 的一些分析，它可以萃取出来很多很多的相关资源，再重新被 reorg 或是 linkage 到 database 里面，其实做更有意义的诠释。其实在未来的一个世界里面，有非常非常多的一些资源，包含我们现在在学校推广的 OPKit。然后很多 open 的 data 其实它都会有一个标准化的问题，譬如说我们现在刚刚在谈到的那个 PID， 就是包含机构、文章作者， 就是都会有一个特定的代码。其实这些特定代码在未来的这个自动化世界里面，它是独具意义的。所以在这样子的，就连带的谈到第二个问题，就是讲到事实上德国它自己有它的 Open APC， 那怎么去区别这样子的一个计划跟 Open APC 这些有什么样的一个区别？当然，就是如同刚刚主讲者所讲到的这些的，因为它是透过一些标准的语汇，一些标准的词汇，所以它带出来的意义就会在后面的诠释里面帮助学校去了解到底在这个过程中，出版社的提供的 data， 包含学校在 OA 的一个奉献度上，到底是沟通的重点，就是议约的重点，或是未来的一个走向，都提供了一些具体的意义。OK， 不知道大家还有没有其他的问题 ？Any question for Yvonne? Yeah, I see. Yeah, this is brand new for us here, so everybody keep in silence.
No, that is fine. And if you have questions later on, feel free to reach out to me. I do a lot of these meetings one-on-one. That is what I'm doing all day, to learn, but also to share. And if you want a trial, there's no charges. It really brings it to life. So if you're interested,
Okay.
let me know.
Wow. 所以如果大家有兴趣的话，如果后面想到问题，Yvonne是非常乐意来回答的，甚至可以有免费的试用。那如果大家需要的话，也可以跟Yvonne联系。OK， 哇，谢谢呀。Everybody know it's very early for Yvonne. It's 6-7 o'clock in the morning in Netherlands. So we thank you get up so early to join us and give us such wonderful speech. So thank you, Yvonne. So everybody, you can clip on the emoji, emoji downstairs and send our gratitude to Yvonne. Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.